We're going to dive into the absolutely shocking story of a king so physically deformed that his own people, his own court, were convinced he was possessed by a demon. This is the tragic tale of Charles II of Spain, the very last of the Spanish Habsburgs. And his story? Well, it's a wild one.
Okay, so picture this. You're a foreign ambassador back in the 17th century. You're about to meet the most powerful man in the world, the ruler of an empire where the sun literally never set. And you walk in and you see this. This description was the shocking reality for anyone visiting the Spanish court. I mean, it was a sight so jarring, people said it gave them nightmares. It's no wonder his own subjects had a nickname for him, El Hechizado, the Bewitched.
So, was it really some supernatural curse? Was he actually possessed? Or was the truth something much closer to home? Something, way more terrifying in its own way? That's the mystery we're going to unravel right now. And the answer, it turns out, wasn't supernatural at all. Nope, it was hidden right there in his bloodline, a really dark secret kept by Europe's most powerful family, the Habsburgs. I mean, you have to understand, the Habsburgs were a huge deal. They ruled a global empire, stretching from Spain all the way to the Philippines. But all that power came with this morbid obsession. They had to keep their bloodline pure. And look, this wasn't some quirky family tradition. It was a cold, ruthless political strategy. It was all about hoarding power and money, making sure their massive inheritance never ever fell into the hands of their rivals. And their method for doing this? Well, it was simple. They only married each other. We're talking uncles marrying their nieces, first cousins marrying first cousins, and they did this for generations. So to really get a grip on what happened next, we gotta talk about a little bit of science. There's this thing called the inbreeding coefficient. It sounds complicated, but it's basically just a number that tells you how closely related your parents are. So just as a benchmark, the child of a brother and sister relationship, their coefficient would be 0.250. Okay, remember that number, 0.250. Charles II's inbreeding coefficient was 0.254. Yeah, you heard that right. That means he was more inbred than the child of a brother and sister. And this wasn't some one-off accident. This was the end result of a calculated family strategy that went on for centuries. To really put that into perspective, just look at this. You probably have 16 different great-grandparents. Charles? He had 6. Just 6. His family tree wasn't a tree at all. It was more like a tangled, twisted spider web that had collapsed in on itself. The same names just pop up over and over again. Get this. His own mother was also his father's niece. Let that sink in for a second. So this genetic train wreck, it wasn't just some abstract number on a page. For Charles himself, it was a life sentence, a life of constant physical and mental agony. He was, truly, a prisoner trapped inside his own body. You've probably heard of the Habsburg jaw. It was kind of their genetic signature. But in Charles, it was taken to a nightmarish extreme. His lower jaw stuck out so far that his teeth couldn't even touch. Think about that. He couldn't chew. For his entire life, every single thing he ate had to be pureed, like food for a baby. And to make matters worse, his tongue was enormous, a condition called macroglossia, so it filled his entire mouth. When he tried to speak, all that came out was the series of wet, slurred mumbles that nobody could understand. And the jaw, oh, that was just the start of it. His entire body was just a mess, a complete medical catastrophe. He couldn't walk until he was 8. He barely grew to 5 feet tall, and his head was massively oversized for his tiny, frail body. His spine was so curved he was always hunched over. Even his hair was weird. It just grew in these thin, patchy clumps. And people at court would report this strange, unsettling smell that followed him around, which was probably because of all the metabolic disorders his broken genes were causing. And the damage wasn't just on the outside. Mentally, he never developed beyond the capacity of a small child. He couldn't even learn to read until he was 10 years old. He was known for these violent, sudden tantrums, and then he'd just collapse into these long periods where he was totally withdrawn, almost catatonic. But you know what's maybe the most heartbreaking part of all this? People who knew him said he was aware. He knew something was wrong with him. He could see the fear and even the disgust in the eyes of everyone around him. And in one of these rare moments of clarity, he's reported to have said this himself. Just a brutally self-aware summary of his own life.
a king trapped inside a body that failed him constantly, in charge of a massive empire he could barely even understand. Okay, so this was obviously a massive personal tragedy, but it was way bigger than that. It was a full-blown continental disaster just waiting to happen. See, Charles' condition wasn't just his problem. It was a crisis that was about to set all of Europe on fire. And the problem was actually pretty simple. A king, especially the King of Spain, needs an heir. Without an heir, the entire Spanish Empire was basically a giant for sale sign, a prize that every other powerful country in Europe was drooling over. But the same genetic lottery that had wrecked his body had also left him impotent. The doctors at the time literally described his reproductive organs as infantile. The great Habsburg bloodline had hit a biological dead end. Of course, the royal court couldn't just come out and say, hey, the king's the problem. No way. So they played the blame game. Their strategy was simple and cruel. Blame the queen. His first wife, Maria Louise of Orleans, was this young, healthy woman, and they put her through years of just humiliating and painful fertility treatments. They shamed her in public for being barren, all to hide the simple fact that her husband couldn't have children. She died at just 26 years old, probably from all the stress and the horrible so-called cures they forced on her. So science had failed. 2 marriages, no heir. The court was getting desperate. And so they went back to that original explanation. He must be possessed. He's bewitched. And what they did next? Well, it's truly one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of any royal family. And these were not quiet, private little ceremonies. Oh no, these were public spectacles. The court's chief exorcist would literally make Charles drink holy water mixed with the ground-up bones of saints. And when, surprise, surprise, he'd get violently sick from it, they'd all shout, "It's working! The demons are leaving his body." You had priests screaming Latin chants over him for hours while he convulsed on the floor. They even purified the entire palace by dragging furniture outside and setting it on fire in these huge bonfires. But in the end, no amount of chanting or holy water or bonfires could fix centuries of genetic damage. Charles's entire life and his death was basically evolution's final brutal judgment on the Habsburgs' fatal obsession. This timeline really just lays it all out, the whole devastating chain reaction. It starts in the 15th century with this policy of strategic inbreeding. Fast forward to 1661, and you get Charles II, the end product of all of it. He finally dies, heirless, in 1700. And the very next year, boom, Europe just explodes into the War of Spanish Succession. It was a brutal, decade-long war over his empty throne, and it ended up killing over 1 million people. And that right there, that is the ultimate tragic irony of this whole story. In their crazy obsession to create a pure, superior bloodline, the Habsburgs managed to create its exact opposite. They literally engineered a king so genetically broken that his very life was proof that their entire philosophy was a catastrophic failure. When you look at portraits of Charles II, you're not just seeing a picture of a long-dead king. You're seeing a permanent, haunting reminder. It's proof that no matter how much power you have, no matter how vast your empire is, you just can't win a fight against biological reality. So in the end, the story of Charles II leaves us with this big, unsettling question that's just as relevant today. It's a cautionary tale, literally written into the DNA of a king. And it forces us to ask, what happens when human ambition, our traditions, our obsession with purity or control declares war on the fundamental laws of nature?